issue, Area C and the Jordan Valley. We all know that these areas are fundamental to the viability of a future Palestinian state. In my brief remarks, let me try to put the issue in a broader perspective, the broader perspective it, I feel, deserves. Now, first of all, why is Area C, and of course the Jordan Valley is largely part of Area C, why is Area C fundamental? It is fundamental because Area C, together with East Jerusalem, are the vital missing parts in Palestinian state building. Now, in the 4 years since I've come here as the Secretary General's envoy, the one outstanding positive achievement I've experienced is actually Palestinian state building under the leadership of President Abbas and Prime Minister Fayyad. This has been acknowledged in our reports to the AHLC, and it came actually to a kind of a point of culmination in May 2011, when my office, the IMF, the World Bank, we all concluded, and the AHLC itself concluded, that the Palestinian institutions are sufficiently developed to support the functioning of a modern state. That was a very important conclusion at the time. But I would like to remind you that at that same time, also in our report, we were warning that the Palestinian state building project was reaching both its physical and its political limits. Now let me give you some examples here. First of all, it is, I think, probably known to you, and certainly known to you because you experience it every day, but it is not widely known, I think, in the international community, that state building project only took place on 40% of the West Bank, the rest still being Area C. And that meant that precisely because of the successful Palestinian state building, Palestinian cities were starting to burst outside of their own city limits and were in dire need of natural growth into Area C. One example, let me give you an example, Hebron, where I have been, of course, many times now in my work here. Major Ozili has been telling me that precisely because of the fact that his city is also growing now, with also rising land prices, he is in dire need of, for instance, relocating industries which are right inside the middle of the city to a new industrial park outside. Again, for which he needs Area C. So he brought me to that place. I saw it. But then I also saw that Area C is not empty, because I saw right on the opposite, I saw an Israeli settlement. I also remember, Prime Minister Fayyad, and you referred to it, that we took the Secretary General to, I think it was the Bitunia lookout point, where that was, I can tell you, highly instructive for my Secretary General, because he saw how Ramallah and also the authority of Prime Minister Fayyad was actually ending right there. We were looking into Area C. Again, Area C is not empty. We saw the wall, the barrier, sneaking through the hilly, beautiful landscape. And of course, we saw settlements on hilltops. That brings me also to the other part, why, in my view, attention to Area C is so fundamental now. First of all, I already made it clear, it is needed for the Palestinian state building to progress. But it is also not that nothing has been happening there. A rival kind of state building project has been taking place there, which are the settlements. Settlements which are illegal. Dr. Mansour has asked me to comment on the UN's position about Area C. Well, very clear. Area C is part of the occupied territory, which means that under Geneva Conventions, you're not allowed to move your own population into occupied territory. So Israel must be held accountable to international law, and international law is very clear about all this. Nevertheless, since Oslo, since 20 years, we know that many things have changed. I mentioned Area C, but I think in this connection, we also have to mention East Jerusalem as another vital part, missing part in Palestinian state building. That's also why the United Nations family, all those 20 plus agencies here, have actually made East Jerusalem, Area C, and also Gaza, where for other unfortunate reasons the Palestinian Authority is not able to actually exert authority. That these three areas are for us vital areas to keep the two-state solution alive. Now, as I have said, in that report, while on the one hand we saw a Palestinian state growing, the responsibilities also of a Palestinian state, it was there, it was assuming its place, its rightful place as a state which should to live in peace and security alongside Israel. We are still focused, we are still actually bedeviled by no movement whatsoever on Area C. I must tell you also that almost 20 years after Oslo, I'm then also beginning to wonder whether or not the Oslo arrangements themselves, which of course were only meant temporary, to be temporary at the time, are not becoming yet another obstacle to peace. There is of course another reason why so little has happened, because while in the 4 years that I've been here now, I've seen positive developments on the ground, I wish I could have said something similar about the political track. But of course we all know here in this room that nothing has happened on the political track. Very little. That there have been almost no negotiations, certainly no meaningful negotiations. Which also meant that, of course, that while we are, on the one hand, we're building the building blocks for that Palestinian state, the very political horizon for it is still lacking. I've been calling that situation in my briefings to the Security Council dramatic, and in one of my more recent briefings to the Council, I have been warning that both parties now should realize that rather than moving towards a two-state solution, the reality is that actually on the ground we are moving to what I have been terming a one-state reality. I call it a reality because I don't believe it is a resolution. It is probably a recipe for continued conflict. But we have to realize this now. Time is no longer on our side. The same I say about the regional situation, where we have still an Arab Peace Initiative. We still have also a perspective for regional peace. But again, if things on the ground, in particular in Area C, are progressing the way they are progressing now, with continued Israeli settlement activity, contrary to their own obligations under roadmap, with all the other things which Prime Minister Fayyad has been mentioning already, but let me also mention them. The demolitions, which, as we are reporting also to the Security Council, have almost doubled this year compared with last year, with ongoing settler violence. All these things are actually moving us in the reverse direction. That is why, in my last briefing to the Security Council, I have asked, and I have been warning, that we need to find ways to reverse this. Now, the most important thing is negotiations. Without negotiations, I think it will be very difficult to achieve a two-state solution. But it doesn't mean that what has started 4 years ago cannot still also be further brought forward. And I think Prime Minister Fayyad in his speech has already given you many incentives and ideas. First of all, I think awareness is very important. This conference will contribute to the awareness of Area C. The vital missing part, as I said, in Palestinian state building. It cannot be that we continue to talk about the two-state solution with the present trends in Area C continuing. We cannot also overlook the fact that at one point East Jerusalem has to be addressed. As I have told you, UN agencies are trying to help the Palestinian people there. We are also having programs for Area C where we try to address the needs in particular of the most affected Palestinians living in Area C. But it brings me to actually, I wanted to be frank with you here in this address to you, dear friends. I have certainly a feeling that time is running out for both parties when it comes to a two-state solution. Achieving a two-state solution that ends the conflict and all claims may be very difficult today, but it has become more urgent than ever, as it may no longer be possible tomorrow. A continued political stalemate is dangerous and should lead to an urgent reappraisal how to salvage the prospects for peace by the parties themselves, but also the international community alike. I sincerely hope the parties will find a way forward in the coming months, and I pledge the United Nations' continued commitment to work for a comprehensive resolution of the Arab-Israeli conflict on the basis of UN Security Council resolutions, the Madrid principles, including Land for Peace, the roadmap, and the agreements previously reached between the parties. I thank you.
دكتور سلام فياض.
بس في إطار الاستدراكات يعني ليس إلا